Welcome to the smallest channel on YouTube. This is a little black box podcast segment, still talking about the independence movement to turn Boundary County, Idaho into its own independent country. Boundary County is, of course, the most northern county in Idaho, along the Canadian border, hence the name Boundary, and it, has a population of between 11,000 and 15,000 people. It's always difficult to get, the exact statistic when populations are always changing. And this is, something that I've talked about before. Why is this a good idea? Well, in fact, I just sort of think it is the future. And I've been kind of like looking at the map, and I'm almost hoping that other counties along the Canadian border of various states like in Montana and North Dakota, maybe Maine, will also think about doing other similar things. And the reason why this could work is we do not need one giant government that is controlling hundreds of millions of people. And even that, I always used to think about that when I was looking at nations like China and India. When you have Prime Minister Narendra Modi or President Xi Jinping, like, how does one person govern a billion people? Or in the case of China, 1.3 billion plus. In India, is going to be in similar fashions. And, wouldn't it be better off if you just had a more localized form of government on a national level? I'm not talking about a county seat, and I'm not talking about a governorship, but you actually have an independent nation that could sit at any United Nations table. And you have this sort of small but independent country that can make decisions about culture, that can make decisions about, language, that can make decisions about what they want to do in their schools, which what I'm hoping is that many people would just sort of be like, hey, I don't even think we need compulsory education in a country like, the independent Boundary County. It would just sort of be like, you make your own decisions. Parents decide what is good for the kids. And in a nation that small, you can actually put these measures into effect. You don't have to answer to all these giant bureaucracies that are united. And to reiterate, I'm not an anarchist, and I don't really think that we need to get rid of things such as, connections to the United Nations, or even connections to the Washington government. It's like, somebody once told me, things like the United Nations need to be viewed as a tool chest. And, it's just what you do with it determines the outcome. What you do with the tools, what you choose to make. If you want to use your tools to build something beautiful and something productive and something helpful, that's a good thing. But if someone picks up a wrench and strikes somebody over the head with it, well, that's a bad thing. Or if you just leave your tools in the chest and you never touch them, that could happen as well. But you need to view something like the United Nations as a tool chest. And, I wouldn't say that Boundary County, as an independent country, we haven't decided on a new name yet. That would be up to a vote of the citizens, or at the very least taking a poll. What this new independent country would have would be, it would definitely have, connections to larger things like the United Nations, but on a national level, which is definitely more pressing, and definitely more pertinent, and definitely more immediate. A place like Boundary County answering to Washington is kind of difficult. And there are so many independence movements around America. One of the things that people really need to recognize is Americans, not all Americans, want to be part of the 50 states. It's like there's a Hawaiian independence movement, there's an Alaskan independence movement, and the Alaska Independence Party did win the governorship of Alaska in 1992 with a 38% popular vote. And there's the Republic of Texas, the Conch Republic, and now Boundary County, Idaho. So one of the biggest things that we would really want to note about places like Hawaii and Texas. Hawaiians and Texans who are supporting the independence movement have a very, very specific claim. And they claim that the transfer of power of these lands was never recognized by their, own governments. Like, for example, with Hawaii, what the claim is that it was done only between the Americans and the British. They didn't They didn't listen to the Kingdom of Hawaii, and the Kingdom of Hawaii never relinquished their claim of their land. And Texas was an independent country for a while, and the Texans never really relinquished their claim of their land. The sort of larger powers, Mexico and the United States at that time, were the ones who did all the decision-making. And so both of those places actually have a historical argument where they say that the United States occupation of these lands is illegitimate. And I don't exactly say that about Boundary County, other than the fact that this would also be an excellent opportunity for Native American groups to voice their feelings. And it would also be a great opportunity for Native American groups to work with a smaller national government, not the government of the United States. We're talking about the government of the IBC, the independent Boundary County. And once again, we're talking about language and culture, and this also applies to the Native Americans as well. I mean, a lot of people just hear that statement and they want to think that, oh, that means that English should be the official language of America. Yeah, it should be the official language of government. There's nothing wrong with that. But, we can also listen to the Native American communities and the role that they want, about how they want to be represented in this democratic process. So, yeah, definitely they would be incorporated in the nation, such as the independent Boundary County, name pending. A lot of things that would be more beneficial to turn Boundary County into an independent country would be, for starters, health care. If you think that health care is going to be more difficult, it will not. I mean, you could make actually a sort of free healthcare system. We don't need to talk about words like universal or single payer or Medicare for all. You could just have a free voucher system, And we've talked about that in the last upload. And if anyone finds the last upload on the independent Boundary County plan, that's available here on YouTube as well. But some of the other things that we could also deal with would be trade missions. The people who are living in this land would actually have a vote in a democratic process to say what they want to do with this land. Because if you think that that happens in America, it doesn't. Americans don't even have a popular vote when it comes to the presidency, because they can't. If they could, maybe it would happen, but it's you gotta look at it this way. We're talking Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, Alaska. If we didn't have an electoral college, these states would not get represented for diddly squat. The reason why the electoral college exists is so people in Montana, Wyoming, Nebraska, Idaho, they at least get some sort of say. But if you were to take a nation of up to 15,000 maximum, just giving out numbers, not that the maximum population would have to be 15,000, but once people would move in, once you have a transfer of power, if you have a nation of 15,000 people, you could have direct democracy. And it could actually be done. If you don't believe me, it works in Switzerland. They have direct democracy with a population of 7 million. So you're going to tell me that 15,000 people cannot work out a way to have direct democracy? Plus, the role of government is going to be very, very limited. The role of government is mostly just going to be about administrating things and facilitating things that cannot normally done. Things like, an energy plan, or, as we mentioned, this healthcare voucher system. But also, we would have things like there is going to be diplomacy, international relations. No, turning Boundary County, Idaho into its own independent country is not about just anti-government hatred, because that's really the way the Southern Poverty Law Center tries to view something like the Republic of Texas. They view that as just sort of an anti-government hatred group. And no, it's about having the people who live in a particular area making their own decisions for that area. And the way to do that is secessionism. Secessionism is just one of the ways that we can view this. Because we live in the 21st century. We live in a world with the internet. We live in a world with teleconferencing and video imagery. And maybe you've heard of things called telephones. We can communicate with people across vast distances. We don't live in this world of getting a letter from the steamship or across the ocean on the Voyagers. No. We live in this world where we are going to be interconnected. The 21st century is going to be all about internationalism, but that does not mean for a second that we have to have a government in Washington, D.C. being the monolith, being, the overseer. We don't need oversight anymore. What we need is diplomacy and partnership and bilateral relations and decision-making. What is so crazy about having the people in one particular landmass making their own decisions about economics, about, foreign policy, mind you? Yeah, the foreign policy for a nation such as Boundary County, Idaho is going to be very simple. American citizens would get freedom of movement through a treaty of peace and friendship based on, the model that was put forth in India and Nepal in 1958. Canadians would get visa-free access, but, it's not the same as freedom of movement. Visa-free access, but you still have to, go through the customs point. Moreover, you could actually have an immigration policy based on what you so choose. And every country is going to have, its own separate law, the same way that every nation in the world does. I mean, you have things called visa-free, visa on arrival, or sometimes in the rare instances, for the nation like Boundary County, you would have to apply for it. And you can some countries get 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 180 days. All of that depends on negotiations. But when we talk about foreign policy, how about keeping people out of these wars? How about keeping people out of wars that the citizens do not want? People up in the chimney part of Idaho do not necessarily want to be killed overseas in Yemen, and they don't want American citizens killed overseas in places like Yemen and Somalia, and not to mention Iraq and Afghanistan. So, what is the answer? Well, if we have, many of these movements starting, and if small counties across the Canadian border can break off and become their own independent nations, it's like you're not going to have people supporting the wars. Because is a county in Montana going to want to go to war with the Middle East? No. Is a county in North Dakota going to want to go to war with the Middle East? No. Is a county in Maine going to want to go to war with the Middle East? No. And is Boundary County, Idaho going to want to go to war with the Middle East? The answer is no. So already we've seen ways to get people health care, ways to actually get people direct democracy, ways to keep people out of these, wars that are killing American citizens, let alone the populations across the sea. But let's talk about the people, that we're living side by side with here now. They're killing American citizens. Let's just try to bring peace to the world. And the way we do try to bring peace to the world, let's take away the power from some of the people who are causing the wars in the first place, all of these global international diplomats, and let's create a national government in Boundary County, Idaho, that makes its own decisions in its own area for its own people. And when they say stuff like, hey, we're going to war, the people in Boundary County can just be like, nope, no, we're not. We don't want any part of that. We want to make our own decisions, take care of our families, live in peace, find prosperity, have our own economic development. We're going to have an excellent healthcare plan, and it's just going to be like paradise on earth. Everybody's got the citizenship applications are going to be so huge. They're going to be flooding in. People from all parts of the continental U.S. and Alaska and Hawaii are just going to be like, I want to live there. Why? Because of freedom and because of peace and because of chances for prosperity. And let's face it, very few, even the people who talk about big government don't want to be told what to do. They just, want more services. Well, this is going to be something even better. This is going to be called prosperity. IBC. Independent Boundary County. The plan to turn Boundary County, Idaho, into its own independent country.